Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
Hand edge band.
on Spoiled Rotten.
Oh, that's you.
I just have to say right away, I forgot my water, so this is going to be a rough one.
It's gonna be a rasp one, eh?
Yeah. Well, we're here to do The Incredible Hulk.
Yep.
I want to say this just out the gate. I am going to ignore the fact that this does not really play into the other Marvel movies
Correct.
because that's not what we're doing.
It's the Marvel film that they completely want to ignore.
Yeah, I would say that yes, they do reference the deleted scene where he tries to shoot himself and then the Hulk's out. But
Yes.
other than that, I know I'm just saying it up top so people know I'm aware. Like, I think why I say it has nothing to do with the Marvel movies is they pretty much create this idea that Betty, Thunderbolt Ross, and Bruce have created the Hulk.
Yes.
And it's like that's their baby, kind of.
Mhm.
And he never interacts with those two people ever again
Yes.
for like 20 plus movies.
Yeah. And
It's
that's,
he never interacts with Betty. She's just not even mentioned ever again.
yeah, she's never
And
mentioned.
then even though Thunderbolt Ross comes back, he never interacts with him.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
then
kind of like
aside from
all right.
that, the Tony Stark that is introduced at the final scene of the movie is not the Tony Stark that they describe in the Avengers, or the first one, where they're like, "Oh, I thought you didn't like me because I'm ego-headed or whatever," and all that kind of stuff, and doesn't play well with others. Like in this one, they've got him like trying to get Ross to be like, "Hey, we're putting together a team," and all this kind of stuff.
But that
right?
was the idea, is that he would consult. They were like,
He
you
would.
can't be on the team, but you can consult.
But I thought at that point, like the way the dialogue works in that final scene, and I know we're jumping way to the end, but like the way that dialogue works at that final scene, it makes me seem like he's already fully on board with Nick Fury, and they're like, yeah, he's going to be the leader. Let's get him to recruit and all this kind of stuff instead of
I don't
Nick
know if
Fury.
you
That's what it seems
recruit
like to
just
me.
because I don't think just because you recruit you're the leader. I think he's a consultant and he's putting together the team doesn't mean he's on it. And he likes getting paid. So that is a joke in Iron Man 2 that he's like, "Oh, my consultant days are like Mondays and Wednesdays." So he's in, but he's not on
That
the
is true.
team.
Yeah, like in Avenger 2, he's like, oh yeah, I just design all your gear, pay for
Well,
it.
Avengers 2 is
Oh, yeah.
different because he's already on the team. I'm talking about Iron Man 2. But yeah,
Oh,
let's we're done with
right.
how it ties into MCU.
Yeah.
I'm just going to talk about it as a movie. But
Which is how we should talk about this, to be perfectly honest, because like to the point you make, they don't make any effort to bring back any of those relationships that they establish in this film. There's no
and I think that's what works about the film is
Yeah.
that dynamic between
Mhm.
those three characters. So
Agreed.
you remove him from that, it makes me feel like you didn't really like care to bring any of that back to the other movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm acknowledging that if we were ranking this against the other Marvel movies, it would definitely be the lowest for me because it doesn't really factor in.
Well,
But
I think when we did our ranking of the MCU, like the 22 films, not including Far From Home, I think both of us concluded that The Incredible Hulk was at the bottom of the list.
yeah.
I believe, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was definitely the case. It would either be that or Thor: Dark World, I feel.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm just saying that up top. I feel like it doesn't really. It's not what we should be doing as we rewatch these Marvel movies, but
Right.
we also are acknowledging that for the most part, these Marvel movies are setups for the next thing to get you to
Correct.
keep watching.
Correct.
This one feels decidedly not like that. I mean, other than the ending. The ending is
Yes.
kind of like, oh, but what's going to happen next? So yeah, Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. I will say I watched this with the most opportunistic, hopeful mindset I could possibly give it, knowing that we already ranked it low. I try to find redeeming values and qualities of it, as opposed to just shitting on this movie for about 2 hours, right? I just didn't want to do that, because despite what this film ended up being, the people that worked on it worked really, really hard. And that deserves a lot of respect there. And I think there were some really, really good points within the movie. It's just, to me, this was a very clear case of too many cooks in the kitchen. And an unhappy film lead,
Yeah, I'm just not an Edward Norton fan. So there's that. It's got that hurdle.
Yeah.
I think Iron Man works because, as we said, like at a certain point, you're kind of just like, yeah, like Robert Downey Jr. is very engaging. I do remember saying like I wasn't really like invested in him, but I was like, yeah, he's saying funny things. I can watch, scene to scene. It works for me. For this one, I found I just tuned right out, like during the whole Brazil sequence, and I get it's kind of what I like about the movie, but it's just ultimately it doesn't work for me because I don't care about the Hulk. Like, he's not a favorite of mine in any form or fashion, but I like that it is structured like the TV show at the beginning, like that whole idea of like he's trying everything he can to not Hulk out, but then he does and he saves the day, but then it means his cover's blown and he's got to move. I understand conceptually why that's interesting and why people might like that. I do think that's a strength of the movie, that kind of setup, but it just means that for that first part, I'm like, he's not charismatic enough for me to be like, I'm interested in all this just Edward Norton stuff.
Right.
I really found I like my eyes glossed over at a certain point, even though I was like, yeah, like this is all good in terms of if you like the Hulk, this is pretty much what you would have been raised on, like this flow of events. That's good. I like that. Yeah,
the flow of it made much more sense, because of course when I rewatched this movie, I have to compare it to the 2003 Ang Lee Hulk, which was even worse. Like, we didn't even
I feel like people like the ideas it's trying to go to, but I feel like for me, and I only watched it the one time, I was just like, I feel like you are sacrificing whatever kind of artistic merit you might have, because you're like, yeah, but it's a comic book movie, and then you do like weird things with the camera. And maybe that's just my shortcoming, but I was just like, I appreciate this movie more for not being so self-serious, I guess. It's not like, it is trying to entertain you, and so like it would be one thing if you did a Hulk movie, which I don't think is the best venue for contemplative, like inner monologues about fathers and sons, like,
correct,
because of how long it is and how long it is before you see someone do the Hulk thing. It's like good for Ang Lee for trying to find something tangible to like work with, but I'm just like, it comes off as way messier than this movie, where it's kind of like, I feel like I understand everyone's motivations. I understand what they're trying to get at, and it executes that. Not the best for me, but it is, I can see the A, B to C like of what's going on. The thing I like about this film more than the 03 Eric Bana Ang Lee one is the idea that they really go to lengths to show you in this one that he is not the hero. He is being hunted. He's all this kind of stuff. Versus the Ang Lee one, there's like a lot of like heroism within the movie, like as toned down as you can do with the Hulk, because the Hulk's not a hero. He's supposed to be this misunderstood beast, and he's just defending himself and the ones he loves. Right. That's the whole point. That's why I don't like him as a main character. But
like that's why he as a main character, it's not compelling because it's only one thing, like, oh, wait till he gets mad and all that kind of stuff. Like that's it. Like, there's no other movement until later on in the MCU, where they introduce the idea of like Planet Hulk, but then he's been 3 years in the Hulk body, and now
but also he's not the lead ever, and it's not like on his shoulders. So that's,
you're absolutely right. He's not the lead, but now
so it's better.
The idea of like Professor Hulk existing, whether or not that could be a lead, is debatable, but it's something still I'm not really interested in seeing, because now we just have a neutered Hulk or just Banner. You know what I mean? It's like, that was the primary complaint about Hulk in I think Infinity War Endgame is that he felt so weak.
Yeah, I didn't like that
yeah.
because that's missing the complete point of having character arcs. But
Exactly.
yeah, I don't. That's a weird criticism for me because that's not
Really?
how story arcs work. Yeah, that's
Right.
well, like what you want to watch, like what is it, like over 10 years of like Hulk stories just so he can be the same person he was at the
No,
beginning
no,
in
no, no, no.
2008.
No, what I'm saying is that overall,
I know what you're saying.
yeah,
But what I'm
overall,
saying is it's a bad criticism,
yeah,
I feel like,
it-
because it's ignoring the
yeah,
fact that you're actually trying to build to something.
yes. Well, yeah, but and of course we know the reason why he doesn't have another solo film is because of legal rights and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, more so than anything else. But I mean, granted, if Marvel did do a solo Hulk film, I'm pretty sure it would have redeeming values. It wouldn't be top cream of the crop, but it wouldn't be absolutely horrible either.
Mhm.
At least that's my faith in it. But I feel like it would also have to be another situation where you'd have to bring in another character.
Maybe. Well, let's talk about the one they did do, Incredible
Yeah.
Hulk.
Yeah.
So they there's one scene I think really works well. The same way I felt in Iron Man, there was like that whole Yinsen stuff really worked well, and then you're just kind of like, well, that's that, I guess. I feel like that's all we're gonna get in terms of like character development, and it happens right at the beginning of the movie. This one at least is placed a bit, but I mean, we know it's U of T, but that moment where he's at the university, like that whole sequence of events, I'm like, this is really strong stuff. It is
Yes.
everything you need to know about this character. It has a beginning, middle. It feels like that is just the movie, that whole sequence, because
It feels like the beginning of the movie, to be perfectly honest. I mean, that's
it
the
is
only
the beginning of the movie,
reason
but it does feel like you complete the arc of what's happening because
correct.
it's got four people who are really like have something at stake here. There's Bruce, who just needs to get this information so he can cure himself.
Yes.
And then he's like, oh no, the love of my life is here, Betty.
Yeah.
And Betty's there to be like, look, I want to help you. Betty's father, I never remember Thaddeus. I never remember his actual name, but Thunderbolt Ross is there. And you can see how they play with each other. But then there's Emil Blonsky, who's, as you kind of alluded to at the beginning, like in any other movie, he's the hero because he's the
Yes.
one that's going to stop this monster. He's actually somewhat successfully done the Captain America serum again.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like there's this anticipation even of like, oh shit, okay, like here we go. Like he got fucked up in Brazil, but now he's back and he's got a second chance at the Hulk to put him down. You even have that moment where Betty's like, yeah, don't ever refer to me as your daughter again. There's like a whole art for Betty and her father because the father's like, but you don't understand, this guy is a monster. And she's like, no, he's Bruce. And so then her father's like, well, now I'm going to show you what kind of a monster he is. And he forces Bruce to turn into the Hulk. He even has the line, now you'll see what he truly is.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's so many, it's like a really intricate thing going off of like four different characters having a beginning, middle, and end to this thing of Bruce being like, no, I can't fight. I can't fight. Oh no, I have to save this woman I love that I feel bad about because the beginning of the movie shows that he beat the shit out of her when he hulked out. I mean, beat up isn't the right word, but he put her in the hospital.
Yes.
By accident.
It was the Hulk rage out and because
so you're thinking like,
he didn't beat her. It's just like the consequence of him not being able to control, and then also having the small flashbacks that he does remember from from being the Hulk. Right, we see this over and over and over again. That part was really, really interesting. That he was starting to actually fully starting to make some connections with the Hulk. That was really cool. I really, really enjoyed that.
And the fact that the Hulk and Bruce care about Betty because the Hulk is able to actually hone his energy and protect Betty and get out of there. So I feel like that is a really well put together. It's a longer sequence, but it is really well done.
Yes.
And I feel like that is the saving grace of the movie, really, because it is action packed, but there is a lot of story getting doled out.
Agree. I feel like the U of T sequence stuff is are like definitely the strongest part of this movie. Now, the U of T sequence stuff always pulls me in just because I'm like, I know where that is. I used to study there and I used to play frisbee there, and I didn't go to that university. I didn't pay their tuition. I just hung out there because I lived closer. It was one of those things where I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I remember that one night where I was like, walking on St. George Street, and I actually saw them shoot some of the scenes. I hung out there until like 3 a.m.
I remember them shooting the end fight scene, bits of it in Hamilton when I was waiting to get into a club. Yeah.
And it was a fun thing to know that. It brings that, like, that's the part of the movie I like. But the thing that sucks about it is that I think Edward Norton, I see where they were going with it, but unfortunately he's too strong of an ego to let them do that. Because
what do you think? What do you think?
I just feel like his push towards really, really focusing a lot, we know that he was not happy with the ending of the movie, and he was brought in to write a lot of it, but then he wasn't credited for it, so I don't know what happened there. But I feel like whenever you have, like, I always think about the Terminator Genesis thing with Christian Bale and how they're like, no, like John
Salvation.
Salvation, where he just, like, Christian Bale essentially, like, no, you have to rewrite this whole movie for me. Like, and I don't know what's going on in the background, but, like, to a degree, I can see some of that happening here, where you're like, some of the decisions and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very interesting how this goes. And it's inconsistent because there's some things where you're like, that's kind of weird. I wonder if that was Edward Norton. And then there's like, that's kind of weird. I wonder if that was just they didn't understand the Hulk character. But this one, they clearly understood the Hulk character much, much better, obviously.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just the inconsistencies there, where there's some certain places where, like, oh, this is really, really fast paced, and this is really short, and this drags, and all this kind of stuff. It's just an interesting thing. And I one of the things I was really, really, really I didn't notice this time around was, like, Ty Burrell, the guy that Betty's dating.
Doc Samson.
Just like gets pushed aside immediately. Because Bruce is back and all this kind of stuff, and there's no further acknowledgement of it, and just, like, it's not important to the story or anything or the movie. It's just I felt bad for the guy because I'm like, oh man.
Well, I think it's important to the extent that what I liked was the only reason Thunderbolt Ross was able to find them at U of T. I know it's not U of T, but the only reason he was able to find them there is because Doc Samson told where they were going.
Yes.
And I find that interesting because they show you how he has to live with that regret after the fact, where he's like, what do you regret telling me? He's like, she's safe. He's like, but from who? Like, the Hulk saved her. You shot at her. Like, that's fucked. Like, no wonder she never wanted to talk about you as a thing. Like, I actually liked that element of it, that it wasn't, I mean, and I don't even think he told to be like, how dare she leave me for him? I think he was just like, well, we need to get her back from the Hulk. Because I don't know. And then he, like, sees, like, what happens. He's like, oh, I was wrong. Like, she is safer with the Hulk than with her dad. Yeah,
to me, it was just like everything his character experienced there made sense. And like, it would have been more along the lines of spinning propaganda, I think, with the way Ross would have told him. Is like, oh, he's got this monster, Banner's done this, he's terrorized this, he's, like, caused this kind of destruction and all that kind of stuff. And obviously you think that description of that kind of person with the person you love, and, like, you know, they're running away together, so to speak, and or not, hasn't been established yet. You just think to yourself, you're like, well, I understand why he would rat to try to protect her, but then he sees everything. And then he's like, dude, Ross, come on, man. You did not tell me the truth here. But at the same time, with the confidentiality.
I don't know how much spin needs to happen, because the fact is, last time they interacted, she was put in the hospital.
Correct.
And the fact is, Bruce can't control it.
Yeah.
So regardless of what Ross tells you of his point of view, those facts still would make you be like, yeah, it might be a good idea if you track her down.
Yeah, those are still objectively true facts.
That's why I'm saying I like the character, because I feel like there's enough room for me to believe that it wasn't a vindictive thing, or even like we have to protect her from this monster Ross was talking about. I think he had his own information.
Yes.
That is like, yeah, there's no room for nuance in that of like, well, he didn't mean to hurt Betty. But the point is, even if you accept he didn't mean to hurt Betty, you also know he can't control it.
Yeah.
So I like that you actually see that play out. Well, you don't get to see him make the decision, but they added that bit of a scene where you actually get to see him like be like, well, yeah, I made the wrong choice. I shouldn't have done that.
I fully appreciated that they gave him that scene, because with the amount that he was in the movie, they very easily could have cut it and it wouldn't have been noticed. I think
right.
from the movie, considering where the movie is at that point in the movie already.
You would have just been like, oh yeah, they found each other. Like they found him.
Yeah.
Like,
You'd be like, okay, whatever. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, Batman got back to Gotham. Okay. You just start to suspend your critical analysis.
Yeah, that would have been the movie magic of it. You would have just been like, yeah, whatever. Or you would have been like, well, yeah, actually no, because they are the ones that caused the Hulk to come out. But yeah, I still would have believed like, whatever, they had a tracker on him or something. Like or someone said, yeah, you put
or that they were like, or Shield had a gamma radiation scanning thing or something like that. Because Shield didn't enter the picture until now. It was just like pure U.S. government, right? There's so many ways that that could have been written. One of the biggest story points of this movie that I genuinely love. I know the Brazil stuff didn't work for you. It worked for me. As well as it could have, to the extent that it could have, because it is slow. It's not irrelevant, but it's not as relevant as the other stuff. It's where it gets back to New York.
What it does that I think works is show the amount of effort it takes for him to not Hulk out.
Yes.
And the extent he's willing to, like, he's trying different things. Like he's with, I don't know but the breathing exercises he was doing with that guy, and
I want to say capoeira,
maybe that is, they didn't show any capoeira, but maybe that's kind of like the precursor to capoeira. Yeah,
capoeira. I don't know. It's like it's like a fighting. More, or maybe Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I'm not too sure, because they didn't show any fighting sequences.
And I wasn't paying attention, so there's that. Yeah. But I think so you get to see that. You get to see that. Yeah, left to his own devices, he's probably just gonna try and like live a low-key life, not even like a normal life, but like a under the radar type life, until he can cure himself. So yeah, I feel like it's more relevant than you might be giving credit for. It's just, for me, Edward Norton's not the actor to carry that for me. Maybe if it was Mark Ruffalo, it would have been able to carry better for me. But there's just something, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it sounds like I really don't like Edward Norton. It's just, I find him to be like either really intense and stern, or that's it. Yeah. Or like he'll surprise me with being goofy in something like Sausage Party.
Yeah. So like Edward Norton to me I really, really like him, but only in specific movies because of his intensity. And in this movie, his intensity makes it that I can't believe that he's Bruce Banner. That's probably one of the best ways that I'm like, Edward Norton doesn't work for me as Bruce Banner, because with Mark Ruffalo, he's got that timidness, he's got that shyness, he's clearly like really, really suppressing every aspect of his emotions, right? You see that in everything that he does. But with Edward Norton, he's frantic, he's snappy, he's like all this kind of stuff. And you're just thinking to yourself, I'm like, anyone that's like that has to have is wearing a heart rate monitor, must, like, it's twitchy, it's fast, and it's like, it's not what you would expect from someone that needs to keep their heart rate low or managed, or that practices Brazilian jiu-jitsu or meditation or whatever it might be. You don't see those kind of mannerisms, or you don't expect those kind of mannerisms. You expect something cool, calm, collected. And
I guess what I would say is this movie does a better job of showing me that he's actively trying to suppress it. Right. I think Mark Ruffalo is just kind of like, he's going about his day, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm the Hulk.
Yeah, well, my assumption is by that point in his life, he's learned to control it decently enough to live a relatively.
But I do think that's kind of the only reason why that line, that's my secret, I'm always angry, never really landed for me, because I'm like, are you? Mm-hmm. You seem like you got a handle on things.
Yeah.
Whereas with Edward Norton does seem like he's always frustrated
Yeah,
but
scared or-
there's all the visual cues of him checking to keep it so he can keep it in check. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, that is someone who's like working on it.
Mhm.
So what I'm saying is what's in the movie on like the page on the screen works. It's just
Yes.
the wrong actor to like bring
Yeah.
it to life for me.
And that's exactly the best way to put it. There's a lot of really good ideas here. There's really good story beats, and most of the people around Edward Norton are doing a fantastic job. Like Thunderbolt Ross and Betty are doing a great job. Ty Burrell does amazing with what he does.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love Liv Tyler as Betty because she doesn't really pull
Well, I
off.
don't love Betty because I don't really get like what it's a role that you're kind of like, what is the best case scenario of this role? Like kind of like Rachel Dawes, where you're kind of like, I mean, you could put whoever you want in this role. Like what's the upshot here? Like it's this awkward thing where her whole life is just like dictated by men. Like that's how it's written. And it doesn't really give you much time to shine.
No, and that is the problem with her character is like everything that she does is fully servicing or dependent on the men in her life, and I'm like, that sucks for her, man. And I really hope like later iterations of that character
Well,
have
I
like
think that's kind of why they
differences.
got rid of Betty Ross moving forward.
Right. Like if Betty was actually actively working on a cure like while Edward Norton's like gone or something like that, I would have so much more respect for it, right? But it's just
But it's still in service of someone else. Like what does she care? It's
you're
more
right,
like she doesn't have any like other
there's
than
no-
her. I mean, it's still a male thing, but there is the parental connection thing that it makes
Correct.
things interesting because then it's like, well, it would just be nice if it wasn't also like, well, am I going to be with my boyfriend or my dad? It would be like, yes, you have the dad on one end, but she's got this other thing that she wants to achieve independent of Hulk. So meaning, you're right. The only other thing you would write is that she's working on a cure, but I would still see that as so that she can be with her boyfriend.
You're absolutely right. Or like cure him, not to be with him or cure him, but it's just in service of him.
Because at this point, it's only the one person affected. It isn't like, we need a cure because this is happening to everyone.
Yeah.
It is that thing that we talked about, that they created this. So it's their issue to deal with. And it is contained to them. And the movie is all the different ways their creation spills out into the world because of their actions.
Yeah. I think one of the things that surprised me about this movie too was the moment where you find out that Blonsky takes like 2 doses of the super serum, super soldier serum, or the newly synthesized one that they made from Banner, the Banner stuff and all that kind of stuff, and how effective it was. It worked.
Yeah, I was like, wait, he moves better than Captain America. Like, and I know that comes because they hadn't really decided on what Captain America would be at that point.
Yes,
but it was interesting that I'm like, wow, like he is moving really well it is exciting to see because you do have that thing of like, well, this could blow up in his face as well. Like, when he first, not the second encounter with the Hulk, when he's got the serum in him, it's kind of like, well, yeah, like this might not go well for him because they haven't really perfected this, but it shows it works. It's just the Hulk beat him up. But outside of that, you're like, oh wow. And as I said, we know as the audience he's not the hero, but if you had no context for Hulk,
you would think that he's
you would be like, well, yeah, like this is, or you would think maybe they team up together because they come to terms with like, oh, we shouldn't be working for. And then it is that idea of just like his whole thing is driven by, well, no, I want to beat up the person that beat me up.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any greater good idea after that. His whole, I mean, I guess they even show that when he like shoots the dog and you're kind of like, oh, he's just an asshole.
His motivations as a villain is just very, very, very.
Sorry?
Yeah. He like shoots the dog. Well, with the trank, I'm glad they show you that thing with the trank because, like, I was watching.
But he does it so like he does it like he took joy in putting the dog down.
Oh yeah. Like he's a villain. Like for sure he's a villain. But like everything about the position of his character would be like, no, he's fighting for the good team, right? He's fighting
So I
to
guess,
kill the
yeah,
monster.
you've made me have to retract my statement. No, there is. If you're paying attention, no, you can't be like, oh, maybe he's the good guy, because of stuff like the Trank and just his overall motivation to do this is not to save lives; it is to take a life.
Yeah, or to just prove that he's the best, or like that, like it's that
But it
motivation.
is, but it is. He's willing to go through all that pain so he can kill the Hulk. It isn't because he's
Yes.
like, oh, the world will be safer without the Hulk. It's like, no,
Yes.
he embarrassed me, and now I want to kill him.
Yeah, it's very much, his character is very reminiscent of Craven the Hunter, where it's like his only drive is really to kill for sport or just to prove himself or whatever it is, right? So like his character reminds me of Craven in that way. Yeah, the interesting thing, coming back to my point, is that ultimately, fundamentally, Thunderbolt Ross's super soldier serum ultimately works, and they did a double. I believe they did a second dose, right?
Before to bring him back from all the like bone breaking and stuff.
Right. So, so he heals himself, and then they do it again, and then he doesn't win, and then the third time, round 3, he becomes Abomination because he just forces the Mr. Blue, Samuel Stearns, to shove Banner's blood in him, right? And then we get Abomination, which is, something that Ross didn't actually think about. But the thing that's interesting to me was like, okay, well, Ross, you should have been able to put together that the first serum worked, the second serum worked. Maybe you should look back into the Super Soldier Project in the files there, assuming that they're not confidential or that he's above that level of confidentiality, and be like, oh, this is why they chose Steve Rogers, because it's not the physical attributes you need to look for. It's the, I guess, the characteristics of the person, like what his drive is, what his motivations to do, or like Steve's motivation for the war is to protect people, right? Versus Blonsky is like, no, I want to kill this guy. So it's like the serum that they develop works, and it never comes back again. And that's why, like, another thing of this movie is like, no, they really wanted to contain this movie because that's a big part of anything that could happen. Think of all the villains that could have been created there, everyone else that Ross could have like try that super soldier with a bunch of different people, like a whole army, and then
to be
attack
fair,
them.
it looks like Falcon and Winter Soldier will basically be using that serum for whoever they make US agent.
Correct.
So it's not completely out of the picture at this point,
right?
Because I'm pretty sure we know that Thunderbolt Ross is in that show, so it might be his serum that he has that's gonna go to who, I can't remember the name of the character, but US agent.
Yeah.
I meant the alias, but I'm
pretty
sure it's Wyatt Russell that's playing US agent. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you're right that it is another example of them leaving things out from this movie, but I think it's coming back into play.
I see. Yeah, we'll just have to wait for Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I am dying for. It's gonna be incredible, I feel. Because one of the rumors is that Thunderbolt Ross is gonna come back and establish the Thunderbolts, right?
Yeah, I think
that's what
so.
we're thinking. Yeah.
But who knows? We'll see if it ever comes out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe it's out by the time people are listening to this.
Right.
We don't know.
And just for everyone that knows, because we're recording this in October, the Thunderbolts is like a team of supervillains that Thunderbolt Ross puts together to do missions and all that kind of stuff, Avengers style. But they're villains turned, like, it's basically like a Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad, but less lethal, I guess. Maybe if we can put it that way.
I mean, not really, because I don't know that there's like a threat of them dying if they don't do what he wants.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, there's no hardcore element like that. So to me, it's just like, well, what's the motivation? But to be fair, I don't know anything about the Thunderbolts. So that I'm just saying, like, that's what we're looking at if that does develop, is that they're developing a super villain team, so to speak.
Yeah.
It is what
But yeah, I really like the Emil Blonsky character because, he's real determined. and then he gets his comeuppance at the end. I think.
Mhm.
Does he die?
Yeah.
No, I guess he doesn't because they always threaten that he's coming back. So he
Mhm.
just gets put out of commission.
Mhm.
Um,
Aikido instructor. That's what it is.
that's what it is. Nice.
Aikido is
Thank
the,
you.
but
We're
it
talking
is
about that breathing stuff he was doing.
the
right?
breathing stuff from the Brazilian side of things when he's in Brazil. Yeah.
So those are like the four main characters, I would say.
Mhm.
Blonsky, Bruce, Betty, so many bees, and Thunderbolt Ross.
Mhm.
I guess we could talk about Mr. Blue. That is another MC or Marvel villain, the
Mhm.
leader. It's interesting because I think that actor's name is Tim Blake Nelson. It's the first time of two times where he is clearly playing a Marvel villain, but he just never gets to fully do it. So, because in Fantastic Four with the Josh Trank one, he's playing Mole Man, but he never gets to like transition. And then in this one, it's like, yeah, we're leading up to the leader, and then obviously that just didn't work out.
Mhm. Yeah, Tim Roth is such a good villain. Just everything about his visual look and the way he carries himself is just like, oh, you would love to see him.
Are you talking about Blonsky now?
Yeah.
Okay, I was talking about Mr. Blue.
Oh, Mr. Blue. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like Mr. Blue. I think he's really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's Tim Blake Nelson. Let me look up his name.
Tim Blake. Oh, yeah, because I heard Tim and I was like, I thought you were talking about Tim Roth. Yeah, it's Tim Blake Nelson, the Sam Stearns.
Yeah, that guy turns into the leader. You see kind of how the blood goes into his head.
Yeah.
Near the end.
Yeah, and that was cool. I wish they kind of were able to build that up a little bit. But I mean, maybe one day. But
yeah, maybe one day. Probably not with him, but yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah, because if they do it with like I imagine that they would have to recast, because if they do it with him, I'm sure they would have to use the footage from this movie, and that would just be like, oh, remember this movie exists, and I don't think Marvel wants that.
No, I don't know why you would have to use the footage from that movie.
I'm not saying that they would have to. I'm just saying that I'm thinking that it might be a possibility, and therefore
you just could be like, yeah, Samuel Stearns.
Yeah,
everyone knows that people have to watch all of our movies to get what's going on.
I think one of the really, really cool things and small little MCU things that I think is really, really fun, and I just read this, is that Martin Starr, who plays the college student, Norton
has the pizza
with the computer, with the pizza, that character is actually shows up
teacher
in Harrington, in Spider-Man: Homecoming and Far From Home. Like, that's continuity of the same character. I don't know if they did that on purpose.
I feel like that's more like they're just saying that the same way they're like, oh yeah, that kid from Iron Man 2 is Spider-Man. Yeah. I don't think that was ever like I think they're like, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. But the funny thing is, like, I'm thinking about that because I'm starting to think about Far From Home or Homecoming. I'm like, what subject did he teach? Did he teach a science thing? Because he's clearly in a science lab.
Yeah,
or was
teaches science. That's what they're on. They're on a science.
Okay, so cool. That could be cool. I mean, like, I like that. I don't think it's a big deal, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's exactly like the Iron Man kid being.
Yeah, like it doesn't change anything. It's kind of like, okay.
It's like, oh, neat. It's one of those like, hey, you want to see how nerdy I am? This is this guy. Yeah. Like that's one of those fun fact kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a nice thing. I feel like I saw Nick Fury's name at the beginning of the movie. That was interesting.
Yeah, you do. I think
because I think you had even said like, yeah, because S.H.I.E.L.D. is keeping an eye on Hulk, and that's
because you see,
and it is
you see Nick Fury and everything like that, and it's in the beginning where like the beginning title sequence where they're showing the name of the actors and everything like that, and it's a brief like Easter egg where you see a case file and it says S.H.I.E.L.D. or something like that, or Nick Fury. It's very, very quick, so it's very easy to miss, but that's just one way they're like teasing the fact that this could build into a bigger world. And then of course the Iron Man scene at the very, very end does cement that in.
Mm-hmm. I did like the opening sequence. Yes. I was like, oh, that's a nice way to like catch everybody up. Be like, yeah, this is what happened. This is why certain people feel the way they do about other people. And I will say I do like the score. I just
Yes.
I like the like deep strings on it. Those are really cool.
Yeah.
So it's got that going for it. A nice score.
I did
Very
like the
strong
use-
opening credits, I
Yeah.
feel, to be
I
like,
like the use of the original Hulk theme in there. I-
when he's leaving
When he's
the
when
town.
exactly when he's leaving Brazil, they use the exact like the theme for exactly what the Hulk TV show is. It's like, oh yeah, he's been discovered. He's got to go somewhere else now, and then they play the music, and then that's the theme. Like I did like that the fact that they did it right there and then. It's kind of like that. It's like how in the Raimi Spider-Man, like you have the woman on the subway playing the original Spider-Man theme song. It's those
And-
nice little nods that are really really fun.
In
Like
Iron
kind of
Man,
like how he's like, oh, purple pants. I don't think so, kind of deal.
Yeah. In Iron Man, his ringtone is the cartoon theme song for Iron Man. So they do that nicely. Yeah, I just my general thing is just like it's all got interesting parts to it, but I just don't care that much about the performance by Edward Norton to be like, yeah, this was good. It just makes me tune out for a bit, and then I really like the U of T sequence, and I always find that like even when I saw the movie for the first time, I was like, oh my god, they're still fighting. But like at the end with Abomination and Hulk, I'm like, I'm just not that invested. We already had a bunch of times of Blonsky like doing this, and I think it's because at that point Blonsky's already just gone. It's like, I'm just gonna create havoc, and so it doesn't feel like a moment anymore because you already had the moment at U of T where it was like, okay, now they're like even, or he thinks they're evenly matched. And you even have that cutaway to Thunderbolt Ross where he's like, holy shit, like he's doing it. Like he's keeping up with the Hulk in this fight. So that like seems interesting because there is this idea of like, look at this human facing off against the Hulk and he's not losing necessarily, or at least he's not like, it's not a one-sided fight. And but then by the time you get to Abomination, you're like, well, yeah, they're just gonna punch each other a bunch of times and not really there's not really any tension as to what's gonna happen.
Yeah. The only tension there is whether or not Ross is gonna let him turn into Hulk and save the day. That's the only thing.
Well, not by the time they're fighting.
No, yeah, well, yeah. Like it's by the time they're fighting, it's just like he just realizes, yeah, there's no other move. I have to do this. I hate doing this and all this kind of stuff. I do like how at the end of it is still consistent with Thunderbolt Ross's character. That is like, oh, Hulk did beat Abomination, but we still have to get the Hulk, and still like run gushes after him and all that kind of stuff. Like that to me was like consistent. I liked that because it was like, oh. Yeah, he saved the day, and Ross didn't just change his mind immediately because of that and be like, oh, you're okay, kind of deal. I like the fact that they were like, no, you still got to capture him. Maybe we can work with him now to like help him cure him, but we still got to capture him, kind of deal. And that was really, really good. I like that.
Yes. Yeah. I because I do think it goes back to like that beginning moment where it's like, or the opening scenes where you're like, yes, for his job, it's in his best interest to have a handle on the Hulk, but on like an ego level, it's like that's probably the one person that scared him the most. And being able to conquer that fear by apprehending the Hulk is probably the only thing that would make him feel safe in life.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how many times Hulk saves the day. He's like, no, I still need to control that. I still need to like have him under my control.
The one thing that was interesting to me was like when, and I completely forgot about the Mr. Blue, Mr. Green stuff, and how like he does try to cure him before Abomination's created, and how that is like that's a decent threat through the movie and all that kind of stuff, and that 5 or 10 minute sequence. Did that work for you? Did like the
No
thing, or like because like they showed images from the final fight already, so you like that didn't work for me in the movie, right? It didn't work for me. I didn't actually.
No, I just don't. I don't like. I'm not a big fan of a movie that's trying to make it seem like, oh, like let's see if the hero gets rid of the one thing that makes him the hero. Like it- no, that's not interesting to me. And like, I also know, like, obviously they're not going to be able to do anything if he actually loses his powers. So
Mhm.
let's not like string this out. Like, let's just get to it already.
Mhm.
Because I know in X-Men 3, Rogue actually gets rid of her powers, but she's one of like 20 characters,
Yes.
and she had
It's
3
it's a,
movies.
and it's a decision that makes sense. It's like, hey, like that was the thing that always bugged me about Storm's dialogue in that movie. Like, no, you're perfect the way you are, except that she can't touch anyone because they'll kill her. Like he'll kill her. She'll
Yeah.
kill them. It's like that's not a power you want. That's not like you controlling the weather. That's like she poses an actual threat to people, and she can't ever have a normal life. Like, can't tell her that's normal. That was weird, and it was just like, hey, that was just very very weird. But yeah, I don't know how we got on that, but
Yeah, no, my point was, yeah, that was after a 3 movie arc.
correct.
So if my first movie with Hulk is I gotta like cure this, it's like, well, all right, like I know you're not going to cure it. So it's not that I'm like, oh, I wish they took that out, because it is stuff that carries over from. It only really comes up again in Endgame, but like the idea that he is constantly trying to find a way to get rid of it um is something at least that's seated in this movie. But I was kind of like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not like, oh, like what's gonna happen. It's like, well, no, and I'm saying that as the person who, when I saw it the first time, I wasn't like, oh yeah, maybe he'll get rid of it. I just felt like, well, best case scenario for him is they say it will help, and then he gets injected and it doesn't. Like, it just, I know he's not going to lose his powers.
Mm-hmm.
But to the point of whether or not that plays into an arc that he goes through throughout the years, then yes, it does still. It is something he struggles with.
Interesting.
But I wasn't really, yeah. But it worked for you. I take it, or no?
The
Losing his
cure thing?
powers. Yeah, like the whole threat of like, oh, I just gotta get to Mr. Blue so I can
No,
be cured.
it's a red herring of a storyline to me. It's just like we know there's no way that he can lose his powers. It's not believable at any point in time. It's just like the only thing that sets up is the abomination. That I mean, at no point in time did I actually believe he was cured.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's just one of those things, and I'm just wondering, like, it did work for Stacy though. When we were watching, she was like, "But how are they?" She was like, "How are they going to fight now?" And like, it did work for her, so it works for some people.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't work. It was just like,
That's good because it
yeah,
means Stacy was invested in the movie, whereas I'm
correct,
like,
yeah,
meh,
yeah.
I'm
And
not, I'm not.
we were watching it from the perspective of, let's watch this earlier so we don't fall asleep because we know it's the Hulk, right? But I actually got a lot more out of this than I wanted to. Just like having the perspective of like, let's be nice to this and let's be kind
Yeah,
and let's not shit all over everything.
I do think it suffers from the same thing I said about Iron Man. I know I said this already, but like ultimately, like now that we've kind of talked through all the points, I'm like, yeah, the problem is they have all of the character stuff contained to one part of the movie. It's not
Yes.
spread out. Like
Mhm.
the same thing with Iron Man that we said that like I get it. The tech is what the star of Iron Man is, but that whole stuff in the cave is so long, and I wouldn't change it like in terms of length, but it
Mhm.
is like confined to that cave. The
Correct.
same way all the character stuff is confined to UFT.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that speaks to kind of the template that Marvel was using at the time of like,
Mhm.
all right, like how do we get the character stuff? It looks like early enough on in the movie so that we can have the action stuff at the end. And I think that is something I would say just not as, oh, so it makes other movies better. Just for this movie in particular, for me to keep caring is to like stretch that that character stuff out
It's
so that
true.
it's sprinkled in throughout the movie and not just this one segment that I feel like is extremely strong, but also makes me feel like, and I could, if the movie ended with like Hulk saving her from being burnt to death and then them running off, I'd be like, yeah, that made sense.
Yeah. I know they did one tests. They did a couple of test screenings of the movie with different cuts. One where they relied more heavily on flashbacks throughout the entire movie to tell the origin story of how Banner and Betty created the Hulk together, and like you start to see that. But then the audience feedback was it was too similar, like it was too similar to the 2003 Hulk, that it was not paced properly and stuff
I'm
like
glad
that.
they
But
got rid of that stuff.
yeah, I'm glad they got rid of it too. I'm glad they contained it in the first part of the opening sequence. The only thing about that was, oh my god, I watched that opening sequence and I'm like, oh man, that was some bad camera work. Like that
Mhm.
POV, the arms looking terrible and everything like that. I'm like, oh, that was just not good from a camera work standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks pretty.
It's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough.
But I still think the idea of it works. Like
Oh yeah.
You don't, because as an audience member, I don't think it matters why they did it. It just matters that it
No, it doesn't.
happened and
Yep.
what's the fallout from it.
But I think, don't they reveal through dialogue why they did it? Like he was.
But I'm saying, like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like you're right, because Ross ultimately at the end he's like when he tells Blonsky like what he was doing, he's like, oh, he was doing this, he thought he was doing this, but secretly we were going to weaponize it, do this and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, it's all the explanation you fully need. We didn't need to hear that, oh, he was working on the cure for malaria, with gamma radiation or something like that. We didn't need to hear that kind of stuff. We just needed to hear that Ross had a different plan and was going to slime him. That was it. That's all we needed to know.
What else is there to talk about?
Yeah, I will say also too, and I'm not body shaming Tim Roth or anything like that, but the visuals of him as the first two doses of the super soldier, it didn't work for me because I'm like, oh, this is some really, really bad CGI work or makeup work to make his muscles pop when there are no muscles, you know what I mean?
No.
So it was just like,
I mean,
it didn't work for me.
Conceptually, but it's not something that registered for me.
Right. It's just like, I'm like, this could have been done better. I'm not saying that he needed to be like, oh, you need to do like a Captain America level transformation in order for me to believe that. It wasn't necessary, but it was just one of those things where I'm like, they could have like done some things like, I don't know, put him in more clothing to bump up the size so we could believe it a little bit better. I don't know, but that scene always throws me off a little bit because it looks like painted on abs and painted on muscles to me.
I did not notice, but as I said earlier, I wasn't thoroughly paying attention until
that's
that stuff. There's the Michael K. Williams character who doesn't have any lines, I don't think, but I think that was a victim of the stuff they cut from Edward Norton's script because he was like a full-on character from Harlem. My assumption being that Harlem was going to be this like last stand ground, and like you would have hopefully in a better way than Justice League, it would have been like you would have seen the people's lives in Harlem, and then you would care that Abomination was about to ruin it. Yeah,
like it's supposed to ground you in that, as opposed to being like, oh, it kind of like
so that it's not just some like. So that it's not just some like town that they're ripping through. You care about the people in that town.
Yeah, like basically the avoidance of the Man of Steel criticism, where they're like, Zod and Superman just took out like basically all of Metropolis doing that fight. What the hell? And there was no connection to the ground, right? Mm-hmm. Versus in Justice League, they got that criticism and they're like, oh, we're just gonna put this random family in the middle of this kind of thing. And that was just like, what the hell? That's stupid. And they also did that for like just Justice League. So it didn't work.
No, I'm saying hopefully it would have been done better than Justice League. And
correct.
Having an actor like Michael K. Williams makes me feel like it probably would have been, because he's disrespect to those actors. He is someone that's known for a certain level of gravitas that engages people. Mm-hmm. That I do know that he kind of gets to be on screen, but isn't fully there. I know that ultimately they were like, "Oh, Edward Norton's not a team player." I have heard that about him more than just from Marvel people.
Mhm.
I feel like his role in Birdman was supposed to kind of like play with that idea of how shitty he is to his co-stars.
Right.
So it's something he's aware of, obviously.
Mm.
But yeah, this rewatch made me be like, yeah, it really is him. I mean, kind of like Aquaman, there's only so much you can do with this character. Like, I'm not gonna get excited because I'm not a fan of Hulk as a main character.
No.
I like when Hulk can like whip through a movie, like Avengers. Like that was the way they used him in Avengers was amazing. The way they used him in Ragnarok is amazing. But I'm like, yeah, I'm not like, oh man, I can't wait for the next Thor or Hulk story.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh man, if to me, if someone said, oh man, I can't wait for Hulk to have a solo film, I'm like, really? Is that how you feel about Hawkeye as well? Like, do you really want a Hawkeye solo film? Like,
I get what people like about Hulk. I also get that there's a very popular run, is it Matt Fraction, of Hawkeye, and I can see people wanting that story to be told.
Yeah.
Don't
get me wrong, they all have good stories. I'm not saying that, but I'm just like,
I'm saying even if you don't know comics of Hulk, I understand the catharsis of I want to watch a movie about a person who's dealing with anger issues and then gets to like release that.
That's fair.
That. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I'm not gonna say, oh, how could you like Hulk? I'm saying it doesn't work for me because that's not what I like. And as you said, there is no real desire for him other than to suppress the Hulk. Whereas I feel like the Hulk is the interesting part. So it's not that interesting to me to have a movie of like, please don't do it, knowing that the audience wants you to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It works in a show where you can just just episodically be like, yeah, he goes to a town, tries not to Hulk out, has to Hulk out, and then we do it again next week.
Correct. It works very well from a episodic TV show, but and again, the way they wrote it to emulate those episodes and all that kind of stuff was really, really great. It just it can't exist as like, imagine a Hulk trilogy where that basically is the only, like, everything that happens all the time. He's just like, oh, I'm here now. I'm like, I Hulk out. I'm embarrassed. I run. I do this. I'm embarrassed. I run. Like that's. But it doesn't work as a trilogy. At some point, he's got to be like, I'm okay with this. I learned to live with it, which is what he does. You know, Professor Hulk.
This is why I don't get when people are like, how come he didn't Hulk out? It's like, you already saw him Hulk out a bunch of times. Yep. And if you care about the character and not just seeing things get punched, then that is a satisfying way of looking at it of, oh, I can do both. I don't need to look at this as an either or situation.
I agree. I like people complain about the Hulk being weak. I'm like, if you're complaining about the Hulk being weak, you fundamentally don't care about where this character.
And also, he's not weak. He's the one that was actually able to survive the snap.
Correct.
He snapped. Yes, he's got a fucked up arm, but that should tell you something. That he didn't lose any power.
Yeah.
And you already got to see him fight Thanos.
He lost.
Yeah, he lost. And it wasn't because Thanos had all those stones either. It's because Thanos actually can fight.
Yes.
And Hulk just throws punches and relies on having just brute strength. Whereas Thanos was able to surgically like take him down.
Correct. Like, yeah, you see that fight scene in the beginning and you're like, Hulk's pure raw force. Yeah, and that's hard to deal with. But if you have someone that's like Blonsky that knows how to fight and knows how to like counter these like brute forces and all this kind of stuff, it becomes like a very, very different thing, because like that fight between after the first super soldier injection with Blonsky and Hulk is fantastically done. You're right. He moves better than Captain America there. His fight scene from choreography standpoint was way better than Captain America, because the acrobatics, everything that he does was so.
It also just seemed like he could move quicker.
Yeah.
And I don't mean run faster. I just mean like his just like leg movement and stuff. Like it was just he was able to look. I guess what I should say is it looked like he had a faster response time.
Correct.
Like
Correct. It was
he
like
can react
more agile.
quicker.
Yeah. It seemed more agile. Like that
yes. Yeah.
fight scene is absolutely fantastic. It's a fantastic fight scene. It really, really is. So when you see stuff like that, when people argue ultimately like, oh, like you should be able to put a better fight against Thanos, I'm like, no, that's why would that happen? We're building up 10 years of storytelling for this one ultimate villain, and you're telling me that you want him to not be a threat. You like. Like that doesn't make sense. The stakes aren't there. You're dismissing.
And when it gets to Endgame, it's like that Infinity War of Thanos that beat up Hulk was having fun.
Yes.
That Endgame guy was there to fuck people up. Like that. Yeah. He even said like, oh no, like before this was just what had to happen. Now I'm like, oh, I want to hurt you guys. Like I'm putting effort into it now. Yeah. And I feel like there's no amount of storytelling you could tell me that would make me be like, but Hulk got better somehow at fighting.
There's nothing.
Thanos
nothing
did
that could do that because
that new Thanos was angrier, so it means he would have gone for the kill instead of just letting him lay there beat up.
Correct. And because the interesting thing about this movie, this Incredible Hulk movie, is one thing I didn't realize is that fight between him and Abomination. Abomination actually stabs him with one of the spikes, right, and actually pierces his skin. So like, even though he's deflecting bullets, taking all these giant 50 cal shots and all like grenade launchers and all this kind of stuff, there is like they've proven that there is a vulnerability. It's just like you have to have enough force, and like the man-made stuff isn't providing enough force, right? So it's just like if you drop like a nuke on Hulk, he would probably not be able to survive that. But like you know, like it's all like with this version of the Hulk, right? So it's ultimately, you can't have the Hulk be so overpowered that he just takes care of everything. It's just not good storytelling. So the way they weakened him up, so to speak, with Professor Hulk, it's like, no, this is fundamentally good. Like the fact that like even Banner goes like, I used to think of the Hulk as the disease. Now I realize he's the cure, kind of deal, and just reframed it that way and just accepted it, and is like he's one with himself, right? It's great. Like that's great storytelling to me, especially from the period of time where it's like you have a 5-year gap from the snap and where we see the Hulk next. You can't tell me he doesn't do any character searching during that period of time. Like it's just those criticisms to me are not well thought out whatsoever.
No. Yeah. It's not good. So anyway, I don't mind this movie, but it certainly like didn't really bump up that much in terms of my enjoyment of it. It was just like, this is a strong bit of storytelling with the U of T scene. I like the idea of doing basically an episode of Hulk at the beginning, even though it's not really for me. I didn't really watch that show or grow up with it. It's just kind of like, oh, that was cool that they did that for fans. I liked the Stan Lee appearance, especially if you just think of it as a one-time movie and not what goes on and how they never address the fact that someone has his blood in them.
Right.
That is like an interesting thing. I'm like, oh shit, okay, like
the thing
that's the effect his blood has on people. I wonder what happens next.
One of the funny things I thought of with that Stan Lee cameo was the idea that, because this would be the second time we see Stan Lee in this, the idea that there's that whole overarching theory of like Stan Lee is one of the Eternals or all that kind of stuff, or the creators of the universe.
The Watcher.
The Watcher, and he's like throughout this whole thing. I'd be like, oh, it would be kind of cool if like that blood gave him the superpower to be that or whatever. It's just like those fun little nods, but of course that doesn't make sense. It's just like, it's still a nice little thing, because I always love seeing that Stan Lee cameo. It's fun.
Yeah, it's nice. That was what else? They have the TV, because I'm pretty sure Bill Bixby's dead, but they had Lou Ferrigno as the security guard. That's nice.
I believe he's
the voice of Hulk until Infinity War and Endgame.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they switched it out to Mark Ruffalo after that. Maybe even it might even be Mark Ruffalo in Ragnarok.
Okay, but I thought the Ferrigno scream was still Ferrigno's, like that, like because like he does that really well.
Well, so it's computer effects, but yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I mean, he's the base for it, but obviously it's layered and stuff
Okay.
like that.
I see.
I think Ragnarok is where he stops being the voice of the Hulk, and it's also why Lou Ferrigno was one of the people being like, yeah, they ruined the Hulk in Infinity Endgame. Like, once you're not getting paid to do it, I can see how you might have some more criticisms.
I understand why he'd be upset about that, but no, that's but yeah, this movie definitely. I think I love what you said about it. On paper, the way the script reads, everything about it makes so much sense, but it was just executed by the wrong person. Now, so ultimately the question begs, if this was Ruffalo, if we replace Norton with Ruffalo, does it make it a successful film, or do you think the direction still does not have
it's
still missing the mark, right?
Well, I mean, it's not missing the mark for what it wants to be, which is just like a fun action movie. I don't think that it missed the mark there, but I still think that it's not like special the way something like, I mean, you know, I will just use the example like Black Panther is special in a different way because it's trying to engage in some other stuff. I don't even think it's as successful as an Ant-Man in terms of just airtight execution of an idea, in terms of this is a heist movie. We are not trying to save the world. We're not trying to do a big thing. So why I like that is because then any criticism of, oh, it kind of feels small, is like, that's all part of it. It's baked into the idea of this is trying to avoid large stakes.
Yeah.
This is trying to work under the radar and not include a bunch of people and make a big deal. So I think I will enjoy it more, but I think it's still the same movie with a different actor, and it's just maybe I will enjoy it more.
I just feel like, and the assumption is that Ruffalo would have played the Ruffalo that we know now, as opposed to the direction that was given to Norton here, whether or not he was given direction or Norton was like, no, I'm Norton, I'm going to do whatever I want. You know what I mean? It's always hard to argue those things, but I don't know, like, you're right. I don't think it would have done much to help this movie out, because this movie fundamentally suffers from the Hulk character not being able to carry a solo film.
For me, for my purposes, I feel that way. I can't make that a universal truth. I just feel like, yes, people can say, well, you know, they don't have Hulk rights, but I think they saw the way Hulk works best, and they're happy to keep it that way, that he's in other people's movies. And maybe if they do a TV show, which again I will concede probably is a better way to do it, they'll do that. But I do think they realize, like, yeah, it's hard to sustain much of anything with a character like Hulk. Yeah.
There's only one direction he goes. That's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah. I mean, again, he started in the comics. That's perfectly fine, because you have forever to tell a story. Correct. Or you could be like, this is a 3-issue story. Mm-hmm. But it is serialized in that way, so you don't have to like worry about too much of a beginning, middle, and end, because the idea is always, well, yeah, but just come back next week to see what happens, or come back next month to see what happens.
Also, with the comic book media property, the reader gets to project a lot of what the Hulk is supposed to be based on what they expect the Hulk to be, right? Versus the movie format. It's like, no, this is our Hulk. This is the Hulk we're serving you, kind of deal. So you lose that element of interpretation through it a lot more with this kind of media, which is what, you know, like, it is its own thing. It's separate media. It can't be argued or like compared. But it is one of those things where why I believe the Hulk works so much better on the written page than on video media, because in video media it's very clear there's one way that you can go, versus like, oh, maybe his eyes were drawn differently, oh, you're seeing compassion, like all this kind of stuff. You're projecting so much more on a picture, I feel, than a video sequence. That's just my interpretation, or just one of the thoughts. But like, to be honest here, I've never really read a Hulk storybook, except for like Planet Hulk and like the final Hulk story where he's like Old Man Hulk or whatever it is, where he's the final survivor. That was pretty interesting, where he's like, oh yeah, this is what the world turns into, and Hulk is a big controller of the United States. You know what I mean? Like that part is kind of cool, but I don't think that story's too big to be told within this kind of media, I feel. And then
Maybe.
the alternative thing too is like, if you tell that story, ultimately what you're doing is being like, yeah, we're done telling stories with the MCU because our world is over now and Hulk's the only character left. So you ultimately cannot tell that story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe.
until MCU is like, yeah, we're just gonna blow this whole thing up and start again. We're gonna
Or you
repeat
could
the
just put
whole
him on a
episode.
different Earth or a different planet, not a different Earth.
True.
Which is kind of what they did in Ragnarok. He was on Sakaar.
Exactly what
But-
they did. I loved it.
But yeah, that's Incredible Hulk. I'm sure we missed some stuff.
Mhm.
I still liked seeing Robert Downey Jr. at the end.
Yep.
It was nice.
I was that scene is a lot of fun for sure, because I like the part where he is like, where he asks for a drink. He's like, reload, reload.
And he's
And I'm like,
drinking an Incredible Hulk. That's nice.
is he?
Yeah, that drink is called the Incredible Hulk.
Oh wow!
I only ever heard it through rap, but I'm assuming it's obviously not an exclusively hip hop drink, or maybe
Okay.
it was. Maybe that was just someone knew of that. But yeah, that is the drink he's drinking is an Incredible Hulk, which is a real life drink.
Okay, I want to see what this is. I got to pull this up from cravingtasty.com. This is a combination of Hypnotic Fruit Liqueur, Hennessy brand cognac, and ice.
Does seem pretty hip hop.
That seems pretty hip hop for sure.
But yeah. Anyway, so that was a nice touch as well. That he is drinking an Incredible Hulk while he's licking his wounds.
Cool.
Yeah, let's rate it. I
Yep.
think. Let's do that and see how that goes.
Sure. I'll go first. I'll give this a good solid 6. I was a lot more entertained this time around.
I also give it a 6.
Yeah.
I had to
Wait.
sneeze and then I didn't sneeze. I hate that. Yeah.
Oh god, that's a terrible feeling. Samesies. Yeah,
We did
it's a solid 6. It's once you recognize the limitations of this movie, once you recognize that it's not something that you want to think about connecting to the greater MCU. It's once you think about all those things, you can just sit back, relax, have a good time, and it is just a simple, straightforward action film, and it achieves that. It really does.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is very well said.
Yeah.
Nice. It's a solid 6. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much for everybody for listening. As Ben said, we are part of That Shelf's podcast network. So please head on over to thatshelf.com. You will see other great podcasts such as Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, No Budget Nightmares with a Great Theme Song, and more. If you'd like to listen to older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, then head to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our Twitter is @tdfspoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. And we are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. So please find us, rate, review, subscribe, and most importantly, or maybe not, but just please, importantly for me, share with your friends. It would be really nice if you did that. And really talk us up. Yeah. Oh, also, I don't know if you saw, but we did get some feedback from the Spider-Man 2 episode. This will mean nothing to people listening now.
Right.
But there was someone else who said that, yeah, they can't listen to anything if they know the volume is in a multiple of 5. So it's kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah, I'm not psychotic. It was crazy.
I mean, we are reaching people. Someone legitimately reached out with a tweet.
I'll tell you how bad that volume thing is for me. I've been in road trips where I've been sleeping in the back seat, heard the volume, someone fucked with it to like 33, and I'm like, within 5 minutes woke up and like, I'm very uncomfortable. What did you guys do? And like, I knew right away. I was just like, this is weird. I don't like it. It was so neurotic. And the only reason why I knew, I wasn't telepathic or anything like that, but it's because I told them that I had this really weird pet peeve.
Yeah.
And then what they wanted to fuck with it, and I'm like, you guys are fucking with me right now, and I don't like it. It's just, it's weird, it's uncomfortable, it's unsettling. It has to be a multiple of 2 or 5. That's it for volume.
And that's how you should listen to this episode of the podcast.
And you know the thing that frustrates me the most? My surround sound system in my living room, guess what the max volume number is?
28.
33.
That's funny.
What the hell, Sony? Like, come on. The thing that bothers me most is like you have 32, and then when you go to 33, it says volume max. Don't tell me it's volume max. I know it's 33. Stop. Come on, Sony, get your shit together. Make it on a scale of 100. Standard. That's it.
All right.
Percentage. That works.
That is Ben's Corner on sound quality.
Yep.
Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.